Today we are going to explore and connect with our inner children. So before we begin, make sure that you have a cup of tea, water, a notebook if you want one, a picture of your inner child if you have one. Maybe you want to light a candle for your inner child. Just take a moment to think about, where am I in my life right now? What's happening for me? Taking a moment to check in and see if there's anything you need before we kick this off with a little bit of a meditation around connecting to your inner child. So closing your eyes, taking a deep breath in, breathing into your body, and imagining your young self. You as a child, maybe you come up at a certain age. Maybe in your body you feel a bit of resistance or uncertainty. Just breathing and being with whatever comes up for you. If nothing comes up, just imagining that there's something there around your inner child. And breathing into the body that you have now, breathing into adult you. Maybe just reflecting on how old you are and how long you've been an adult for. Feeling yourself in this body, in this place, in this moment. And imagining that adult you walks over to little you and sits down or stands there and connects in some way. Whatever way comes up. Maybe there are words. Maybe there are no words. Maybe there are questions from the child, from the adult. Just giving a bit of space to connection between you and your inner children. Taking a few deep breaths in and opening your eyes when you're ready. So a lot of people ask me about inner child work, like, where do I start? And I just want to emphasize that we start right where we are. We start with opening to the idea that we can connect to our inner children and that there is healing available for our inner children and that we can stand in the adult. I think that's a big part of inner child work that's not always focused on, is that in order to connect with our inner child, we need to be in that space of being the adult. And so standing in the adult can be quite challenging for many of us, especially if our inner children have experienced a lot of trauma and are not used to having a safe adult who can take over and hold them. And so it can take practice to stand in the adult and to realize when the inner child a bus. And if you imagine that you are a bus and that at any given time some part of you is taking hold of that bus. And we can use this analogy for all the different parts of ourselves and our inner critic and all sorts of things. But in this case, with inner children, there are children of all various ages that are past versions of you on this bus of you. And at any given time, any one of them could be driving the bus. Or adult you could be driving the bus. Or your true self could be driving the bus. Or whatever part it is can be driving the bus and kind of in control. And so often, if we have particular traumas that happened at certain ages, there can be different splits. You know, there might be a 3.5-year-old, two different splits of, if there was a trauma at 3.5, let's say, there could be kind of two different splits or many different splits of that 3.5-year-old and the different ways they had to kind of compartmentalize and separate themselves to survive. And so inner child work is really not just about one inner child. It's about all these inner children. I often say that I have multiple buses full of different inner children who have very differing understandings and beliefs and feelings. So at any given time, it can also be that many different parts of us are feeling many different things. And so doing this work can be really useful in being able to hold those complexities as well. And so it can be hard also to notice if there's like an inner 5-year-old who feels one thing, and there might be an inner 14-year-old who tries to come in and be like, I know what's what, I'm the boss here, whatever. And if we don't have that developed sense of the adult, it can be hard to know if it's actually the adult doing things. So often the adult is compassionate and understanding. It's like how you would be with your children or someone else's children in your best parenting moments. So another way to think of this is that the adult may be compassionate, curious, connected, and calm. So I'll talk a bit about in a bit of a mindfulness video, those 4 different parts, the 4 C's. So if you can imagine compassionate, curious, connected, and calm, that's the adult version of you. So what would the adult know, say, feel? How would they hold the child you? And it can be really confronting when we feel like, oh, there is no adult here. What if I'm not an adult? And my message for you around that is you are an adult. You are an adult now, and you have the capacity now to develop that connection and that strength with the adult. If there's a part that's saying, oh, there is no adult here, that's a child part. And I understand how hard it can be to bring in the adult part. But the great news is the more that we show up and do this work, the stronger that neural pathway gets of the adult taking control and holding the inner children. And it happens just naturally. So I've had many times now where I've been in like dark spots and inner child takeovers and panic attacks and all sorts of things. And all of a sudden, this adult part of me has come in and been able to be like, I see that you are really panicking right now and you are really scared. I'm right here with you and you're going to get through this. You've been through the worst of it. And I understand that this is bringing up a lot of stuff, but I'm right here with you through this. And so if you continue down this path of doing this work, it is so worth it. And not just for the way you relate to yourself, but also the way you relate to other people around you. So oftentimes in relationship, our inner children can take over because they're trying to get their needs met or they're feeling deep things, and there are these old patterns of them showing up and taking control in relationship. But we can't actually have healthy adult relationship if our inner child is in control. And so doing this kind of work provides so much space for healing and growth and change. It is highly uncomfortable for me still to this day, talking from my inner child and sharing about my inner child stuff in groups and in spaces is really confronting. And it's okay for it to be uncomfortable, and it may be that the adult says to the child, I see that this is really scary right now. I know that it wasn't safe for you to express these things as a child or to even really be a child, but I'm here with you right now, and it's important to me that you have this space. And whatever happens, if people try and shut you down or you don't feel heard, I'm going to hear you. I'm going to hear you, and I'm going to hold you through this. And it's really a process of building trust between you and your inner children, and the adult and the inner children. And it's okay if that trust gets broken and needs to be repaired sometimes. So I definitely have made mistakes and have not held my inner children, and I've had a lot of grief around how I've treated my inner children. And so in those moments, it's important to come back to the compassionate, curious, connected, and calm adult. Because often when we're feeling the other things that are very valid and useful to feel, so it's not about pushing them to the side and going straight to calm and curious, it's about recognizing what's there, giving space for the feeling, and coming back to and building that connection with the adult and that true self. And the other things are all true self things as well. It's just that in this time in our society, with all the trauma that we have, most of our emotions that we're feeling and the things that are triggering us are about the past. And so it's still incredibly important and useful to feel those feelings about the past and to build those new neural pathways of connection from the safe adult. Inner child healing can happen in small little moments, and it can happen any kind of way. This is really a limitless, explorative, creative, playful journey, just like childhood is meant to be. And so it could be that I reflect on what I loved as a child. So I know, for example, that I loved nature and flowers, like these beautiful flowers. And so it could be that when I look at these flowers and I touch them and I play with them, I really allow my inner child to come out and have a play. And I really acknowledge that she loved flowers and she loves to smell flowers. So like I stop and smell flowers all the time, every day. And that's a way for me to connect with my inner child. And it could be that with a friend or someone that's safe, you give space for your inner child to come out and play, maybe at a playground or at the beach or something like that. Or maybe there's an experience that as a child you didn't get to have, and you now want to gift that experience to your inner child. And in the companion journal, there are a few pages about inner children, so that's also a great place for you to start and reflect. But really, I just want to emphasize that it's about opening to these experiences and opening to the idea that you can connect to your inner child and that you are an adult now and that you can hold them in what's there. And so most of our inner children are waiting for us. They have been waiting for us for a long time, and they are ready and wanting to connect. There can often be a lot of fear and those kind of things. And so it can be a balance of giving the child space to express the feelings with the emotional expression stuff we've talked about, and holding them as the adult and just accepting and hearing them and saying, I hear that you're really scared right now, and I understand. And we don't need to change their feelings. You know, the more that we express stuff that is from the past, we can move through it and heal. But it may be that it takes a really, like that inner 6-year-old is afraid forever. And you don't need to change them in order to heal. You know, you can just hold them in a way that they weren't held at the time. And so in terms of holding inner children, one of my favorite ways to do this is I have a safe space that I have co-created with my inner children. So I'll tell you a bit about how I first got started with inner child work. It was doing EMDR therapy, in which you go into it's kind of like a dreamlike state, not quite, but and often, you know, there are lots of thoughts and kind of visions and stuff coming up. And I was doing this, and I just started to have visions of my inner child and me, and that was coming up, like lots of childhood stuff was coming up. And particularly this one time, which was probably one of the most profound healing moments that I had in EMDR therapy, was I had a little secret room in my room growing up, just like a little kind of cupboard under this little arched wall. And I had like decorated it and all these things. And I had this vision of adult me, as I was then, going and unlocking this big padlock chain that was on the door to the secret room and letting my inner child out and telling her, you are safe now. It's safe now, and I'm here now. And that just happened. And I didn't have to push it or force it. I just had this kind of vision of that happening. And that's the kind of thing that I think that can happen quite a lot with inner child work, because it is so natural, and it's already something that when we're on the healing journey and we open to being with what's there, it naturally arises. So it's not about pushing or forcing any kind of relationship with them. It's about building that trust and security and safety and that healthy attachment. And so at the time, I didn't understand the other ways that I could hold my inner child and how to consciously connect to inner child work and how to stand in the adult. It just kind of happened, and I was like, wow, that was really beautiful, cool. And so so yeah, I want to explore with some other ways that we can tap into that space. Drumming journeys are also really great if you do a drumming journey with the intent to connect to your inner child. I've had a lot of magical experiences with drumming journeys and my little ones. But another thing that I learned from doing EMDR is that we created a safe space before we began. And my therapist had me just come up with somewhere that I had been before or not. Somewhere imaginary is fine too. And to just kind of, meditate on that space, in that space for a bit. And then after and before we would do EMDR, I would go to my safe place and just visualize being in that space. And so my safe place is one of my favorite waterfalls that is in Sri Lanka. And so I just would imagine being by this waterfall and swimming under the waterfall and just being there. And so years later, like 6 years later or something, more recently, I can't remember how, I was having a time where my inner children were like all screaming and panicked, and like it was like bus loads of intense emotion, and I was just like, fuck, how do I hold this as an adult? Like I do not have capacity, and I had things to do. I have my own child now, and I was just like, fuck, like I need to just like put them somewhere safe right now and let them know that I'll come back for them later, that I see them and I understand and they can express as much as they want, but I don't have the capacity to hold them right now. And so I imagined driving my bus loads of inner children to this waterfall. And I got them all off the bus. I said, everyone out. And I imagined taking them to this waterfall and saying, listen, free reign here. Do whatever you want. Say whatever you want. You can let it out. It's safe to feel what you feel. And I totally get it. And I can't hold it right now. I've got other things going on, but I'm going to come back, and I'm here for you, but I need a bit of space to be with what's happening in my current present life right now. So since then, I've had this real beautiful deepening of that space. So now what it looks like is this little house that my inner children and I co-created together. So in this, a lot of this is about imagination, and children have wondrous imaginations. And so connecting with your imagination and letting your inner children help you with your imagination in this journey is a beautiful, beautiful way to begin. And so creating a safe place with your inner children where they can be held and supported and where you can connect with them, just as a visualization, I highly recommend. So anyway, there's this house. It's protected by like one of those Harry Potter charms, and people can't see. I made an extra special Harry Potter charm where they also can't smell or hear what's going on behind the spell. And there's this beautiful house, and all sorts of rooms, and there are rooms with all sorts of cushions and things hanging, and they can like punch them and be angry, and they can scream and they can cry, and there is a beautiful kitchen with little fairies that are helping make snacks and just hanging around for good chats. They can invite safe people over and hang out. There is a room full of all sorts of beds. There's like one big bed where they can all hang out together, and there are also separate little rooms where they can cozy up or make forts or whatever they want. And I also recently had the imagination, just the whatever, to create a grieving space. And in this space, there are altars set up for all the people who have died in my life, and especially from childhood. And so there's an altar for my brother and my grandparents and my father and other people that I've known that I've lost. And there's a magical candle that's lit all the time. And it's a space that my inner children can go and grieve at any time. And they can grieve anything in there, but there are altars specifically for people. And I've also had times where I've gone as the adult in there and just had these beautiful healing experiences with my inner children. There's like a big great hall, and this one time they lit a candle for me for every day that we have made it through and survived. And they all were just expressing this deep gratitude for the way that I've shown up for them, and that I have shown up for them. And I kept having this sense that there was someone else in the house with them, and that I was like, if I'm gone, who can be with them holding them? Because I don't want to just like totally leave them alone. I mean, there are like, 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds, and, they can help as well, but they also deserve to be held. And so yeah, I was like, is it older me? Is it like my future self that's there? Because it was this sense that it's like these kind of older women. And I was like, is it my mentor? Like, that doesn't really feel, but I didn't know like who these women were or what the deal was with that, until I went on a drumming journey when I was at witch school. And I had this picture of these 3 ancestors of mine. This is a book that my grandmother made about my ancestry, and I've had a lot of, for those of you that have listened to my podcast with Angel Phoenix Arsenal, you'll know that I've had a lot of ancestral trauma and stuff that I've been looking at and working on. And so as I've opened to that, a lot of my ancestors are really terrifying to connect with and scary, and it does not feel good. But I've been opening to the idea of helpful ancestors and safe ancestors to connect with. And so at witch school, I brought this book, and I had these images of these 3 women. This one is like my great-great-great-grandmother, Emmeline Strang. And there was just something about them that was calling to me. And then I went on this drumming journey, and they came to me in the drumming journey, and they said that they have been with me the whole way. They have been guiding me and supporting me, and that they're sorry that things happened the way that they did, but they wish that they could have changed it, but they believe in me, and they see the way I'm showing up for healing our family line, and that they are in the house with my inner children. And so so it's these 3 ancestors of mine that hang out there. I did give them a little rundown because they are from a different time than me, and they did not do all of the healing themselves. And so I just gave them a rundown of how to interact with my inner children, and how to best support them and hold space for them. And so it's about opening to all of these things that are beyond the like conscious, logical mind. And it's uncomfortable because so many of us did not have the space that we needed to play and explore and lean on our imagination as children. And so when stuff comes up, like fear and shame and all these thoughts and things, being with those things is the way through. And coming back to the adult as well, as I mentioned. I also want to talk about creating, because creativity is the inner child has so many gifts for us around creativity. And so it may be that you, like this is something that I made with a picture of my inner child. If you have any pictures, it can be really useful to help build that connection and remember maybe what things were like for them at the time. Here's another little thing in my journal that I wrote for my inner child. It says, "I'm here now, sweet child. Surrender. Rest on me for as long as you need. I see you. I hear you. I love you. You are sacred. You are safe here. You are enough always. You are enough always." So opening up to, using your companion journal, there are some great little tools in there. But really allowing this to be an exploration and a co-creation with your inner children. So another thing that I highly recommend is getting a stuffed toy to represent your inner children. And this is really useful for a lot of different reasons. But this is my koala, Little Kebby. And for me, also changing my name has been really useful to step into the adult and go, adult me is Lotus and little me is Little Kebby. And sometimes, she's Lotus too. She loves the name Lotus, and that's fine if she wants to be called Lotus. But having a name change has actually been quite helpful. So if you do feel called to change your name, that may be a part of it, is that having a new name is part of initiating yourself into adulthood and standing in the adult. So little me, I used to have a stuffed koala growing up, so when I started doing inner child more in the way that I do it now, and more consciously, instead of just kind of like connecting with my inner children and not really knowing what was happening, I went out and got a stuffed koala, which is fun because I live in Australia now. My inner children totally love that. She has lost her nose, but I love her anyway. And so then it can be great in terms of building the separation between the child selves, the child parts, and the adult, because it can be like, I can see this part as little me and this is adult me. So it can be great to have that separation and to be able to have conversations or to hold and to imagine holding little you and, loving and supporting on little you. And there may be resistance, and it may be that, there's a little part of you who, when you were young, was told, stop being a baby now, don't do that, stop playing, whatever. But that the adult, like I said before, is most likely compassionate, curious, calm, connected. And that adult can hold the uncomfortable feelings and the fear of judgment or shame. For me, a lot of what came up was these voices of my father and grandfather being like, don't be such a baby, stop being like, this is childish and stupid, and all these things. And so that's really normal, and it's okay to hear those things and to explore anyway. And we can also look at any of this in a session, and we'll also have space, of course, in our live call. So with a little representation, there are lots of different things you can do. You can hold them, you can love them, you can snuggle, you can put a necklace on them. You can also, if things come up around particular events or aspects of life, this can be really useful as well. So for example, if you have stuff that comes up for your inner children around sex, it may be that you have a ritual around holding your inner child before, during, after, not during, probably not going to hold them during having sex, but before and after you have sex, or maybe it's before you have a tough conversation with someone, or after you have a tough conversation with someone or something. And so for me, one of the things that I've done is if I'm going to have sex, or if I'm going to self-pleasure, or something like that my inner child is really scared and uncomfortable about, I will put them in a safe place and kind of create a little altar space for them, and I'll have a little chat to them about it, and I'll say, I really want to do this right now. I know that it's really uncomfortable for you and that you're scared. Do you have any questions? Listening to them, and then letting them know that I'm gonna leave them in this safe place right here, right now. And you can do this also with the kind of imaginary, visualized safe space, but actually having something physical and real in the world with you now is really useful for developing that separation and the relationship between adult you and inner children you. And so it could be putting them in that safe place and saying, I'm gonna come back once I'm done, and you can have a bit of space to be held and supported. And this is me doing this as the adult. This isn't you doing this. You don't have to have this conversation. You don't have to have the sex. You don't have to wear this thing or whatever. This is me as the adult doing this, and I want to explore, and it's safe for me to do that. And so it's about reassuring them and allowing them to have whatever feelings they're having, and then saying, I'm gonna leave you here with this right now, and maybe you have supportive ancestors, or it could even be like a favorite person from a TV show or something like that. Like, it can be anything, or fairies or whatever that you want to have help support your inner children. Allowing the imagination to open up and that co-creation to happen with your little ones. So another thing that I have that's really useful, kind of in line with the pictures, is a little altar board. So I've just taken, I'll put a picture of it in here. And I've just taken a little hard placemat and covered it in a piece of fabric that I was given. And then I've just placed, with little clips, I've just placed pictures of my inner children there. And so it's great because it's really portable, and I can just take it around with me Also, like the journal, you know, there could just be a page or something, whatever you feel to do, just explore and open to it. And then it could be about creating that altar and that connection and that place. You know, you can put crystals there for them. You can put little offerings. You can bring them flowers, you know, and having that space, like I said, something in the physical world and in your mind. So you can take the stuff that's in your mind with you anywhere, anytime, and then something in the physical world as well is super, super useful. I also connect a lot with rosemary and lavender. It just so happens that Melbourne is full of lavender and rosemary, like everywhere. For me, there's so much healing and connecting with nature. Yeah, as I mentioned, my inner child had a lot of nature connections, and rosemary particularly. I remember the first time that I picked rosemary from a garden. I went to a school in primary school that was very non-traditional, and we did a lot of gardening. And I remember my beautiful gardening teacher picking the rosemary and having us all smell a piece of rosemary. And I remember her talking about it in terms of memory and how it was great for memory and stuff. And for me now, rosemary signifies remembering my power, remembering my strength, remembering how far I've come, remembering my gifts and my witchcraft, and remembering my memories and all of those things. And so it's just something simple that I regularly see, which is a reminder to just, oh yeah, breathe in, connect, be with what's there. And remember my inner children and all that it took to get me to right here, right now, in this body, in this place. It can also be a process of re-education and teaching your inner child about things that they weren't taught about at the time. So it could be that you have a sit-down conversation with your inner child about emotions, and you could say, hey, listen, like in the past, it wasn't safe to feel, and being aware of kind of what age inner child you're talking to and how you would speak and interact with them. And, you know, like I might hold little 8-year-old me and just let them know that it wasn't safe to feel when you were little, but it is now, and we have different ways, and anger can be expressed in healthy ways. I know that that's not how it was for you. And so with emotional expression and anger and those kind of things, it can be really great to hold the child, have someone else hold the child who's safe, or put them, you know, in that kind of safe altar space. And, you know, let them know that as the adult, you're going to explore with this and test this out. And, yeah, it could be that there's education around sex that you want to talk to your inner child about, or education around spirituality. You know, maybe there were things that weren't safe for the child to explore and that now you want to explore. And so there's a bit of holding what's real and true for them and teaching them as the adult that you are now with what you know now. It could be that as a child, there was a lot of body shame or shame about something in particular. And so maybe there's a conversation to be had around what you know now about the body that you live in, and what the adult you knows about what it was like as a child. And maybe it's about relationships with food, or it could really be anything that you feel like is coming up. And so often when we are in really high emotion, it's from the past, and that's why it's so intense, is because it's something we've carried for so long with us. And so it's a combination, like I said, of expressing that emotion and being with the inner child and having the adult be the one to express it instead of the child, because the child can't necessarily hold all of that and needs support and safe space and holding to be able to express it. Otherwise, it often comes out sideways, especially because most of us were not taught how to healthily express emotions as children. It could be that when you stop and see a dandelion, you decide to blow it for your inner child and make a wish or blessing for them. Or when you're playing with your own children, maybe you allow your inner child that space to come out and play. Or maybe because our own children can bring up, or other children, but especially our own children, can bring up stuff for our inner child. Maybe there's a way for you to have a ritual around holding them when you are with your children, and explaining to them that, things are different for your children than they were when you were a child, and explaining stuff about that, and that although you couldn't be held by your parents in the same way that you hold your children, you will hold them too. And that as you journey through parenthood, you imagine reparenting your child along with the children that you raise. And often our biological children especially bring up, or just children that we're raising especially, bring up what it was like for us in childhood at their specific age. And so it's an intense and transformative time for doing the work and healing your own childhood woundings. It may be that you have a favorite song from childhood, or that you want to make an inner child playlist of songs that your inner child can dance and move and feel to. I know people who also will use their, they'll do a journaling exercise where they use their left hand to write or draw from the inner child and their right hand to respond as the adult. And yeah, it may be that your inner child in this process and in this journey, your inner child needs things to build trust. And so it can be really great to ask those questions and honoring that this is a journey and it may take time to build up that trust, and that that's okay. And recognizing that it is a commitment if they do ask something of you, maybe it's to have a conversation or to set certain boundaries, and to really hold the value of this and of building that relationship and trust. And it may also be that there's a lot of stuff here around this for you, and that's okay too. And if this is something, that feels scary, please reach out. You can, send me a DM, send me an email. We can work on stuff in one-on-one sessions, and there will also be space in the group session. And I'm here for this. And so I'd love to hear what comes up with your inner little ones. I'd love to hear about your safe spaces, if you want to share in the group about what comes up around those and anything that might unfold there for you. And yeah, I will be thinking of you and your inner little ones and the adult that stands in your body right now, the one who made it here, through all that you have survived. Blessings from these flowers and this beautiful nature around me. For me also, nature is a huge part of my inner child healing. Nature was something that was always there for my inner child. So for me, it really represents that healthy attachment, and that nature has always been able to see me and hear me and hold me. And so yeah, even talking to nature, talking to a rock, especially rocks can be really great. And they've been around for a long, long time, rocks. So they definitely have some ancient wisdom. So something like telling a rock your story. And when we connect to nature, also remembering to ask consent and, hey, are you okay with me taking you and having a chat with you? And if you take it back wherever with you, then, checking in around that too. And trusting also your intuition and your process around it. And I'm still sometimes like, did the rock really say yes? Or I've had times where I've taken a flower and then later been like, oh no, the flower did not want to be taken. And I've returned the flower and apologized to the flower's family. And anyway, whatever that looks like for you is welcome here in this space, and whatever comes up, I would love to hear all about it. Thank you.